Hi, and welcome to Danny After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight, I will be doing a book review, and as you have seen from the title, I am very excited to talk about this because it is by a former FBI agent. So the book that I will be reviewing is Dangerous Instincts. Use an FBI profiler's tactics to avoid unsafe situations by Mary Ellen O'Toole. Right off the bat, I am a big fan of Mary Ellen O'Toole. And if you're wondering where you might have heard that name, she is, I believe, in the true crime world, most commonly known as she was the FBI profiler who came in and interviewed the Green River killer known as Gary Ridgway. So you can actually go on YouTube and find and watch those interviews, and you can see how she interviews him. Obviously, that was just one little piece of her FBI career, but I think that's the one where people most know her for. And that is something that she does briefly talk about in this book, but we will get to that when we do. But there's a lot to uncover in this, and I'm really excited to go over it with you guys. I've had it read for quite a while now, and I just kind of put it to the side, and it's time. It's time to talk about it. So before we dive into this book review, let's see who's here. Hey, Tony Stewart. I figured I better wake up, Danny's. Wake up? Gosh, I can't wait to just go to sleep. It's been a long day. Wake up. But good to see you, Tony. Hey, Renee. James Watson. Hello. Kane. Hello, little Milky. How you doing? Let's see. There's a part in the book I'm reading where I don't know what book you're reading, Lil Milky, but I feel like the entire chat would probably be interested in knowing what book you're reading. I was not expecting that. I really was not. So, moving on. I was not changing outfits, James, but good guess. Hey, Capone. Hey, Todd. Hey, Chaos. Welcome. All right. I think I got to everybody. And for those of you who are watching but not in the chat, thank you for joining as always. All right. Again, I have a feeling most people in the chat will be checking out the book that you are reading after the show. Imagine spike in sales. So, Dangerous Instincts. So what I did was I typed out what was on the back of the book, just again, so I wouldn't be like awkwardly reading it at a weird angle. And we will go over that. So the back of the book states, chances are you'll never be kidnapped at gunpoint, your child won't be the victim of a predator, and your financial advisor won't be Bernie Madoff. But every day you make choices that could turn dangerous in an instant. From trusting a date with a drink to letting your son ride home with his soccer coach. Retired FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole knows from experience that what we rely on to assess danger, fear, and emotion simply doesn't keep us safe. She knows better than anyone that instincts alone do not protect us, but that smart, proven analysis can. Using anecdotes from her 30-year career, O'Toole illustrates the SMART method she developed based on her training and experiences with the FBI, from recognizing the risk of a situation to observing people for clues on their intent. Dangerous Instincts shows how to make the safest decisions possible for yourself and your family. I will say that, as usual, the description of that is spot on. I think that only, however, touches on the briefest insight into what this book provides. This book provides so much more than just that. I will say, though, it's a more kind of simplified version of what to expect. So if you're thinking, oh, okay, I heard that, hasn't caught my attention yet, keep watching, stay tuned, because what is inside this book will absolutely capture your attention. We had a few people come in a little late. I know the cats do always make things more exciting. I will say, Tony Stewart, just a quick side note for everybody. One of my coworkers today, just because we're about a week out for Christmas, she left gifts for all of us because she wasn't going to be in. And one of the things she got me was presents for my cats, which I thought was like the cutest touch. I'm like thinking, I don't care what you got me. The fact that you thought about my little kitties, like, makes me so happy. So yeah, that was a fun little treat today at work to get that. Paul from the Paulcast is here. Wow, he must be bored. Be afraid all the time. I mean, when in doubt, keep your head on a swivel. Pretty much. No, we will get into that. Hey, Kat, welcome. So the book itself is 257 pages. And I will say it's an easy read in the sense that you could very easily just sit, and if you're someone who can just read for long stretches of time, which is what I personally like to do, you can do that with this book. Some books are a little bit too heavy of a subject, or just the way it's structured and written, you just can't. It's just too much to take in, so you kind of have to do it in sections. That's not the case with this book. So I would say this is one, again, that you can sit and just kind of read until you're ready to put the book down and then continue on from there. But it is straightforward, where I believe anybody can kind of sit through and just read it. And again, only 257 pages. But I will say each page is packed with a lot of information, which is an amazing thing, because Mary Ellen O'Toole goes through not just what she calls a rap sheet at the end of each chapter, which is a great little summary of what she described, which is super helpful to the reader because it just makes it easy. And it actually reminds me of like books in high school, where it gives that little summary at the end, which is not a bad thing. But also within each chapter, she gives so many examples of the point she's trying to make. Not only examples that each reader can relate to, but actually examples from her career in cases that she worked. I found those the most fascinating out of all of this. And I personally would have liked more of that. So she could have, to me, very easily added on like 100 more pages, because if it was just like her talking about more cases that she worked, because I just found that absolutely fascinating. But that's just me. But she did an excellent job where she's going to grab your attention in every single chapter, again, based on cases that she worked, where she's giving those examples, or just everyday situation examples that everybody can relate to. One of the things that we see a lot in true crime, when something happens, and there are so many cases going on right now, and this is one of the questions. It's one of the questions that always happens is, how did the family not know? How did friends not know? How did the neighbors not know? And it's so easy that we want to think that we'd be able to spot something, but it's not as simple as that. And that's one of the things Mary Ellen O'Toole really breaks down from all of those perspectives, because, you know, people want monsters to look like monsters, and they don't. And the things that we judge people on are really just very superficial, where we really don't know people as well as we think we do. And she gets into that as well. So I will say, before diving into each chapter, I just wanted to make sure that that was kind of relayed as to what the reader can expect in each chapter. And again, I think that's wonderful the way she's just structured this entire book. So quickly see where you guys are in the chat before we kind of dive in a little bit more. Karen Diamonds. Awesome. Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Okay. All right, Paul. Yes. Talk about Manson stuff if you'd like in the chat. And I trust you to do that. All good. James is saying my great-great-great-grandmother from Ireland was named Mary. Oh, that is cool. That's a fun little side note about you. I'm more worried about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that is a very, I think, relatable thing that we probably all agree on, just the way the world is right now. The book doesn't necessarily address that, but I completely hear what you're saying, Renee. Yeah, absolutely. So back to the book. One of the things that Mary Ellen talks about right in the beginning, before we even get to chapter 1, there's some kind of some quotes that I pulled from the book that I thought would be very interesting. And then she talks about profilers. And that's one that, again, we all watch the TV show, so we think we know how it is. And it is so not even close to what actually happens. So one of the things Mary Ellen says is, quote, "We all like to think of ourselves as smarter and less naive than the typical crime victim. We like to think that we somehow possess the instincts that would alert us when a dangerous person is in our midst. I've found, however, that few, if any of us, have instincts that are so accurate and perceptive that we should ever rely on them when making important decisions, especially when those decisions involve our safety or the safety of our families, workplaces, and finances." She also says that our instincts often lead us to trust people based on superficial details that generally have little to do with true normalcy. In fact, dangerous people can be masters at appearing normal. They dress nicely and keep houses presentable. They usually don't look out of place. They don't seem threatening. And our underlying belief is that if we are nice to them, they will be nice to us. Some of the most dangerous of people fit right in. They can be outgoing, charming, and exceptionally good at making eye contact and putting us at ease. Well, talk about being spot on. Like, she just gets right to it. So anything that the reader might kind of think maybe as a little bit of reservation of, well, oh, that wouldn't happen to me. She just cuts right to it and saying, here's how this breaks down. And that is awesome. She does it in in a soft way. If you've seen Mary Ellen O'Toole in any interviews that she's done or listened to any podcasts that she's been on, her voice it's so soft. It's so warm. It's so inviting. It's so comforting. It's nice. It seems it appears friendly, and so on and so forth. But those words like that, those paragraphs right there, just hit right on where it should be. Eventually I was going to get that sentence right. A few people came in. Hey, Corey Novak, welcome. Tish Pomfret. So I just discovered this. This sounds so good. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Tish. Welcome. I hope you enjoy. So let's see. So one of the things that Mary Ellen O'Toole talks about in regards to profilers, she says, we are observers of behavior. We take into account what we observe at a crime scene and also consider the behaviors that are absent from a crime scene. We add that to other pertinent information like forensics, blood spatter patterns, ballistics, wound pathology, autopsy reports, investigative reports, and more. We use that information to develop a, quote, criminal investigative analysis, end quote, a profile, investigative and interview strategies, and strategies for the prosecution during court procedures. This book, as it said on the back, will teach you SMART, which is an acronym that stands for Sound Method of Assessing and Recognizing Trouble. This process will show you how to assess other people for signs of potentially dangerous behavioral characteristics. Now that we have kind of set the tone in regards to what the reader can expect going into each chapter. Let's dive in. Some of the chapters, the way I kind of structured my notes to kind of review with you guys, some of them I just go straight to the wrap sheet at the end, and I'll show you what it looks like at the end of a chapter. Let me just get to one. So like, for example, it looks like this on this page. So you can see where it just kind of quickly has some bullet points summing up what was in that chapter. Some of the sections here, I'm just going to read what the wrap sheet kind of bullet points are. I think she does such a great job. I don't miss Paul reading. James Watson, I'm going to give you a star for that because I don't miss Paul's reading either. So yeah, the way she describes it in each chapter, when I started writing notes for some of them, I was like, I can't do this justice in any way. So I'll just say what the wrap sheet says, where I hope you guys as the reader would want to purchase the book for yourselves and then kind of read more in depth. But then some chapters, I do break down some of her notes. So just so you guys get a feel for how I did this. So chapter 1 is what she says in the wrap sheet in regards to you can't tell if people are dangerous just by looking at them. You can't always take people at your word. Dangerous people are good at blending in. If you ask the right questions, you can learn how someone is likely to behave by listening to his or her answers. And you can't walk a mile in a dangerous person's shoes because dangerous people wear a different kind of shoe, one that doesn't fit you. In this chapter, she also talks about the difference between instincts and intuition, and she gets pretty detailed into that. And I will say when I first saw that, I was thinking, okay, well, yeah, I know that difference. But when she breaks it down from an FBI profiler's viewpoint, there's so much more involvement than just the simple kind of words that we associate it with. So that I thought was really excellently laid out. She also talks about how strangers generally pose less of a potential threat to you than others closer to you, who you probably have in your comfort zone. That is scary. That is scary. But she's right. She's absolutely right. So now that I've kind of got you guys a little bit nervous, let's dive into chapter 2. The chapter 2 wrap sheet, she talks about how you do not have to feel that you are a victim of bad luck or random circumstances. By learning how to make, again, the acronym SMART decisions, you can change your circumstances for the better. You probably regret decisions that you made spontaneously, impulsively, and based on your emotions. You are less likely to regret decisions that are thoughtful, careful, and made with your long-term future in mind. Also, many people who believe in intuition in theory would never rely on it during a life or death situation because they intuitively know just how unreliable it is. It talks about how your survival instinct might guide you to safety some of the time, but in other times it might actually lead you towards danger. You can train your instincts to react to some situations, but you can't train them to react to all types of situations. When personality is very important, she talks about that and why it's important. Because once you understand someone's personality, you can do a much better job of predicting how that person will react in various situations. Like we talked about earlier, you'll be more effective and successful in dealing with others because you will begin to understand their particular behavior. You will know what makes them tick, so to speak. She talks about 6 myths. And I'm just going to say what those 6 myths are, but under each myth that she's described, she gives a lot more information, a lot more detail, and a lot more examples. But the 6 myths are: adults can have significant changes in their personality. You can leave your personality at the door. Some people have Jekyll and Hyde personalities. Quiet people have no personality. A mood disorder is more concerning than a personality disorder. And then lastly, you can have a nice or good personality. Let's see. Renee says, do you ever just feel vibes off bad people? I think some people are hyper aware. Oh my gosh, absolutely. Speaking for myself, more than I can count probably. And again, in regards to going over this book, I'm not saying that necessarily, don't trust. It's easier said than done to be like, oh, don't trust your instincts or trust your instincts. But there's something to be said for not ignoring those, feelings or vibes that we get, right? I'm not saying, here's, the be all end all. If you follow this, you'll be 100% safe, because no one can ever be 100% safe, right? We can just take something like this from someone who did this for their whole career and maybe just try to be a little bit more ahead than we normally would have been without that information. But 100%, if you're in a situation, you're like, something's just not right. And it doesn't mean, well, I have nothing to go off on, so I'm just going to stay in that situation. No. But no, I completely hear what you're saying. And gosh, been in that all the time. Hey, Charlie16, welcome. Good to see you. James Watson. And that's why we love you, hon. You are accepted here. More so on the Paulcast, but here too. So, chapter 3. The chapter 3 rap sheet goes into how you can't read people's minds, but you can, by observing their behavior and listening to what they say, get a bit of a read on their personalities. Doing so will allow you to predict how they might react in a given situation. Your feelings about someone can be easily manipulated by flattery, impression management, and more. For these reasons, feelings, and Renee was just there, feelings or gut instincts are usually not an accurate way to gauge the dangerousness or trustworthiness of another person. Once you understand someone's personality, you can more accurately anticipate and even predict how that person will react in different situations. That's one of the things that you're going to see if you're thinking, wait a minute, you've said something like that now already several times in this episode. Yes, I have, because that is a point that she goes through within each chapter, but almost, I would say, building upon it in a really, really insightful and helpful way. So that's why if you're thinking, wait a minute, we talked about that a little earlier. We did, but it's revisited again. Hey, Psychos Platters. Good to see you. Long time no see. I hope you're doing well. So chapter 4. Now we're getting into a little bit more of the meat of the book. And this chapter is what makes people dangerous. So for me personally, chapter 4 was probably my favorite chapter in the book because she talks about her work with Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, as I mentioned earlier. So Mary Ellen talks about this experience. She worked with Gary for over 6 months, and they couldn't just take Gary's word for what he had done. They wanted to find bodies of victims, more bodies than he originally had given information for, so that families could finally know what happened to their loved ones and who was ultimately responsible for the death of their loved ones. She talks about how Gary was very difficult to interview. He was not consistent with his information. He was more helpful on some days versus others. Sometimes he was interactive and responsive, but on other days, getting information out of him was like pulling teeth. One day he would confess to killing a young woman, but then the next day he would deny that he did that. So Mary Ellen's role was to interview Gary about his personality, family, upbringing, and crime from a behavioral perspective. And again, you can look on YouTube and find a lot of these interviews with him, like directly, Mary Ellen interviewing him. So Mary Ellen's role, again, was trying to understand the psychopathy and crafted a number of questions that was designed to sort through Gary's lies and evasiveness and to determine whether he felt any remorse for his victims or the crimes that he had committed. Gary's responses implied that he thought he would be at the top, that he was one of the best, if not the best serial killer, more famous than the others. Gary said he felt bad for his victims, but Mary Ellen tried to press him for what felt bad meant to him. And I thought that was actually extremely fascinating. And what Mary Ellen would go on to describe was that Gary could not articulate what feeling bad meant for him. Eventually, he explained that he felt bad about the evidence that was left at the scenes. That is so telling. That is, again, who's he feeling bad for? Not for the victims, for himself. I think that is so telling. But anyway, since Mary Ellen spent her career studying and interviewing people just like Gary Ridgway, she understood his personality. She knew that before she even walked into the interview room with him, what would happen if she told Gary that she was in a hurry and had to go investigate another series of crimes committed by a different serial sexual killer, and that Gary was unaware of these due to news reports, would be aware of these due to news reports. She knew he would be annoyed if she acted like another killer was more successful, more interesting, and more notorious than him. So Gary would attempt to impress Mary Ellen and to get her to try to understand his point of view. She knew that killing was probably the one thing that Gary was most proud of. And it was actually one of the things that he was, for a long time, exceptionally good at. So again, she talks about how instincts and intuition are clouded by our own perceptions based on our own personality and our own experiences. And then she goes through kind of what is normal behavior and what is not. And I know the word normal can be taken a variety of ways. And what is more normal behavior can change over time. If you think about it, what is normal now in 2024, certain behaviors weren't as normal back in, say, 1970 or 1920, so on and so forth. But for the context of this book, we're talking about what is normal at this time of the present. She goes over myths about psychopaths. And again, I found that absolutely fascinating. She talked about the word psychopath itself is in the English language often used to describe people who aren't psychopaths at all. So psychopaths are classically referred to as people that don't have a conscience. A psychopath feels about as guilty as destroying your own peace of mind, reputation, financial livelihood, and life as you do. And the example she uses is when you blow your nose into a tissue and toss it in the trash. For somebody like a psychopath, once it's discarded, to them, it's done. That person is done. They never think about it, never go back to it. It's out of their mind. It's just garbage at that point. Again, comparing it to being normal individual just blowing their nose and tossing that tissue. You're not sitting there during the day thinking about that tissue that's in the garbage. It's just something that is discarded. It is out of your mind. It's just trash at that point. That is how a psychopath thinks. So let's see. A few people came in. Just wanted to... Hey, Chris James, welcome. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Everybody take a moment in the chat if you have not already to wish Chris James a happy birthday. I will not make you ask how old you are today, but I hope you're having a fantastic day. So just making sure, James, I grew up across the border during the Green River killings. They were always in the news, and it was scary for a little sensitive boy like me. Yeah, and Tony Stewart saying, I remember always watching news at 6:30 about the Green River killer. These people are not wired right. Oh, yeah. I mean, that, to put it very simply, pretty much. Victims of violence are more likely to be looking for it. That's definitely another perspective as well. Okay, just making sure. I've read the Andrew book on the Green River Killer. This sounds fascinating, though, coming from an FBI police. Oh my gosh, chaos, absolutely. You will not be disappointed in this book. Absolutely. But I still have a lot to cover with you guys. So, but you will absolutely love it for sure. Okay. So we just talked about psychopaths in regards to how they don't feel, and once their victim is discarded, that's kind of that. So the book also goes into a psychopath's lack of remorse and their callous lack of empathy and that really is what at the heart makes psychopaths so dangerous. When a psychopath engages in criminal behavior, he or she can be one of the most dangerous of criminals. Psychopaths have shallow or prototypical emotions. They have learned, and this is so scary. This is so scary. They have learned to pretend, sometimes with precision, how to emulate emotions that they see others around them doing. Because of this, psychopaths, have to mime feelings and make them up. Asking a psychopath what remorse or guilt feels like is like asking, and she gives the example, is like asking a man what it's like to be pregnant. It's experience that they've never had. In order to answer the question, they can only resort to what others have told them about this experience or what they've observed from people around them. They are not able to speak from personal experience because they have not felt remorse or guilt. Psychopaths can describe feelings, but they have no personal experience with them. Their description is based on, again, what they have observed in others. Psychopaths are also predatory and manipulative. They don't think the rules apply to them. They are grandiose thrill seekers who take no responsibility for their behavior and have viewed the world in a way in which they dominate it and can take whatever they want whenever they want it. So there are, 7 myths about psychopaths that she has in here? Oh gosh, no, double than that. There's 14 myths. And again, each myth she goes into detail on, but just for simplicity, I'm just going to say what each of the myths are. Sorry guys, it's one of those days, Talked nonstop today. So myth number 1, you are either a psychopath or you aren't. The words sociopath and psychopath are interchangeable. Psychopaths are psychotic. Psychopaths don't know right from wrong. Brain tumors and brain trauma turn law-abiding citizens into psychopaths. Most psychopaths were violently abused as children. Their parents made them into what they've become. In most, practice cruelty to animals. Psychopaths are capable of being in love. Most psychopaths are violent. Psychopaths don't work in white-collar professions. Psychopaths are smarter than the average person. People just snap. The maternal instinct protects children. All strangers are dangerous. Dangerous people look scary. 14 myths. And those myths are the only word I can think describe is just very scary, because we all, I would say, know somebody that has traits like this, or that we might think has traits like this, that we don't even know are psychopaths. You know what I mean? Because they can blend in so easily, and they can, like Mary Ellen says, kind of mime emotions that they've never felt. They don't know what that is, but it's just they've seen people around them act a certain way in that situation. So they're like, oh, okay, that must be what people act like when they're feeling this emotion, because they're just incapable of it. Let's see. Renee says sometimes a psychopath will do things to try to feel. Yes. Todd says, I worked with 2 psychological liars. These guys are probably capable of almost anything. Well, according to everything that we just talked about, probably. So the chapter 4 rap sheet, again, those little summaries at the end of each chapter that Mary Ellen Toole does. Dangerous people can be so good at impression management that your gut feelings will tell you that they are safe and they are good guys when they are anything but. Psychopaths lack empathy and remorse, but they do not feel guilt about the lives they've ruined. People capable of hurting others can look very normal and come across as charming and non-threatening. You and your loved ones are more likely to be harmed by someone you know than by a stranger. Dangerous people do not necessarily stand out in a crowd. They don't look different from other people. And then lastly, dangerous people usually don't snap. They exhibit red flags that warn that they might become threatening or violent. So she talks about also blind risk and why we are blind to risk. Reasons being our first impressions, recommendations from others, superficial details of normalcy, personal biases, our own personalities, and past experiences. She also talks about 5 ways people misinterpret details: normalizing, rationalizing, explaining it away, ignoring, or icon intimidation. That is so spot on in regards to not just the topic at hand that we're talking about, but just in our normal everyday lives with little just everyday things that we do. We normalize a lot of things that maybe on the surface aren't. We can rationalize it, kind of easily explain it away. You don't want to jump to the worst case scenario in your mind, so you might just put it to the side, rationalize it, oh, it must be this because it couldn't possibly be this horrible other thing. Some people just ignore it. Again, when I read those 5 things, I'm like, okay, those are just things that happen in everyday life, which you can see how then it would cross over into something more serious like this. Renee is saying spree killers are not as common as the killer you piss off. I mean, yeah, just what she was saying. Renee, you're touching upon that where, let me find it right here. You and your loved ones are more likely to be harmed by someone you know than by a stranger. That's scary. That is so scary. Because again, we think we can kind of see these things and see evil and spot it a mile away. But we really can't. So going on to chapter 5. So in chapter 5, she weighs the pros and cons of underestimating that we tend to underestimate the cons and overlook the biggest risks of all. Again, those kind of things that we can do that happen in everyday life, but just on a more magnified stage. We assume that we can tell at a glance when someone is dangerous, but even the best FBI behavioral analysis cannot do this. Dangerous people can look about as normal and as abnormal as everyone else. If a first impression is a good one, we will tend to filter out negative information that we notice later on in favor of details that support our first impressions. Positive recommendations from others can bias our judgment and keep us from noticing danger. We tend to become disarmed by superficial indicators of normalcy, even though there's nothing to stop someone who seems normal from also being dangerous. We tend to, again, we just talked about this, how we tend to normalize, rationalize, and explain away and ignore risky details. If you take one detail and focus on it without taking other details into account, you will most likely reach an incorrect conclusion or form a very poor decision. So that's kind of summing up what chapter 5 is about. Again, she goes way more into detail on each of those. So chapter 6, she talks about how to improve your judgment and why your individual decision-making style matters. So she talks about your level of experience in making high-risk or stressful decisions, as well as your personal biases and your emotional state at the time that you make these decisions. It will ultimately all affect your ability to make the SMART decision. SMART is in the acronym that she talked about at the beginning of the book. That SMART acronym, you see it weaved through each chapter in this book and how it's applied. Again, she goes into it way more in depth in each chapter, but nonetheless, you will see that acronym SMART weaved throughout the entire book in all of the chapters. So the chapter 6 wrap sheet is when you use the SMART model to make decisions, you reduce your risk of negative consequences and gain a sense of control over your life. Your ability to make smart decisions can be honed in on with practice. Rare decisions can be risky because they put you out of your comfort zone and force you to lean on others for help. Very frequent decisions can be risky because they can lull you into a sense of false security. Regretful decisions are usually influenced by pressure, a false sense of safety, rationalizing statements, lack of information, strong or negative positive emotions, failure to consider the long-term consequences, and failure to consider what would happen if you got caught, or personal biases. So, hey, Miss Jessica, good to see you. Hope you're doing good. Let's see, Renee, I was raised by criminals, which I am waiting to read your book when you do put that out because I want to know everything. Renee, I want to know everything. How is everybody in the chat blue? It's a membership thing. No, it's just I don't have my YouTube screen pulled up. So come in during my True Crime and Chill tomorrow night and I can add a wrench. So the wrench is not a membership thing at all. A wrench is just gives people the ability to post links. A lot of time you guys will be talking about in the chat either something in related to what I'm discussing, or sometimes you guys are just having your own side conversations, which is awesome too. And if there's any links or articles or websites that you guys want to post to share that, having the wrench allows you to do that. Without a wrench, you can't post links, which is, yeah, just YouTube. But yeah, I don't have that separate page pull up. So come in my show tomorrow night and I'll rent you. Did a Brillo pad get added to the store yet? God. Let's see. I just bought the book from Audible. Tish, that is amazing. I'm so excited to hear what you say once you read it. Once you read it, I want to know. I want to know. So stay tuned. Oh gosh, that is funny. Oh man. All right. So chapter 7, Mary Ellen O'Toole goes over how to assess risk. And then there's different levels of risk, right? High risk, medium risk, low risk. She, within those, goes over factors that can quickly turn a low or medium risk situation into a high risk situation. And some of the things that would create a more high risk situation are the things we would generally think about: physical risk, health risk, social or emotional risk, professional risk, financial risk. So the chapter 7 rap sheet goes over, again, take more time to make decisions that are high risk and medium risk. High risk situations can have extreme consequences and long lasting consequences. Medium risks can swing high or low depending on the circumstances. Low risk situations threaten only minimal consequences. But we all can also look at something low can turn into something high very quickly. A low risk could have the potential to turn into a high risk. So kind of cut it off at the pass if possible. She talks about try to mitigate as much risk as you can in high and medium risk situations, and that some situations in itself just cannot be mitigated. And in these cases, the best strategy may be to extricate yourself or others from the situation. God. Jessica, what have you started? So chapter 8 goes into how to uncover information and how to conduct an interview. I would say for myself, this is probably my second favorite chapter because, again, we learned, for me, in chapter 4 about how she approached Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, in an interview. But now we're kind of taking a step back in how to uncover, just generally, how to uncover information and how to conduct an interview. So I wanted to, for myself, read more into this chapter. I actually probably read it like 2 or 3 times because I found it absolutely fascinating about those little things that you can do in these situations. And again, I'm just going to hit the bullet points for each, but she goes way more in depth on those. And it's so good, like such good information. So, oh my God, Paul, name one person that would purchase a Paulcast Brillo pad besides you. So no. All right. So an interview is not the following. So this is what it is not. A confrontation involving lots of emotion and battle lines being drawn. An accusation that involves you telling someone what he or she did or did not do, or not allowing the person room to actually explain his or her position. An intervention that involves you telling someone what his or her problem is and how you are going to fix it. Or a lecture or sermon during which you do all of the talking. So she suggests doing this before an interview. So this is what to do. Again, before the interview even begins, set some goals, calm down. Think about how your interviewee will react to the interview. If you worry you'll lose your cool, write a script to follow. Decide where you will conduct the interview. Decide when you will conduct the interview. Decide how you will conduct the interview. And then do an assessment of your own style. That's just absolutely spot on point. So the first 5 minutes of the interview, she says, set up your physical surroundings, make introductions, build rapport. 5 ways, or 5 tips, if you will, to build rapport is to explain how much you care about the person and the outcome. Say that you need help. Adults like to give opinions and to fix things. Chat about a common interest. Reveal personal information with caution, and introduce the goals of the conversations. In regards to how to ask more effective questions, there are 8 tips here. Offer a few compliments, ask open-ended questions, slow down your line of questioning. Information, use silence to your advantage. Acknowledge someone whenever he or she provides you with an honest and sincere answer. Don't allow emotion to get them off the hook, and reflect back what they say. There's also what not to do. But before I jump to that, I do want to say, like, some of these techniques and tips and tricks that she says whether to do or not to do, more so the things she says to do, are things that I look at, I'm like, I use that in my job. I use that in my job. I also use that in my job. And then the things she says not to do, I'm like, I've made it a point not to do those things in my job. And again, these are just very basic things, but so impactful and powerful when you actually take them from just theory, oh, like, okay, don't do this or do this, and then actually put it into practice. So I just want to, there was a few comments here, and I just want to make sure I get to that from you guys. Talking about Gary Ridgway. There was a clue for police. Microscopic paint flakes were found on several victims. Didn't his coworkers always tease him about Gary Ridgway, Green River? I don't recall that offhand if his coworkers would tease him. Let's see, what a fascinating story. Didn't they catch Ridgway when he was going back to the bodies for fun? Even just like, I know you're using fun in quotations. It's just like disturbing because we all know. And yeah, that's one of the things. Again, if you look up Mary Ellen O'Toole's interviews with him, I've listened to them over and over and over again, to the point where I'm like, I feel like I know them by heart. But each time I listen to it, I feel like there's another piece that I like, I guess I didn't realize he said this, or I missed when she asked him this, or she rephrased it in this way. And then that is when he answered. There's so much information. But yeah, that's one of the things she talks about. Sam Smith, I was waiting for you to come in. Welcome. Good to see you, hon. So we talked about what to do in regards to asking effective questions. What does Mary Ellen O'Toole suggest what you don't do? And that is, again, she gives a lot of details in regards to each thing, but just to put them simply, don't hijack the conversation. Don't jump in and fix someone's problems. Don't talk for more than 15% of the time. 15%. Don't note your displeasure at what the other person is saying. Don't threaten, manipulate, or bully. Don't tell the other person how he or she should feel. Don't blame. Don't daydream or multitask. Don't get emotional. Don't accuse or confront the other person. And don't filibuster. Now, in regards to how to be a better listener and how to listen between the lines. And again, these are just very important skills just for everyday life, I feel. One of the things that you want to listen for, what they say. Also, what is the person telling you? Did they accidentally let anything slip? What the person doesn't talk about, that can be just as equally important. What isn't the person telling you? Is there a pink elephant in the conversation? If yes, it is okay to say that you feel he or she is avoiding the main issue. Your interviewee will let you know if you are off the base. It's also important how they respond and what they say. What emotions does the person seem to be experiencing? And based on this, both verbal and non-verbal behavior are things to look at. How to observe behavior when you're in an interview. Is the person tuning out? Are they exhibiting avoidance? Are they hijacking the entire interview? Are there inappropriate emotional responses, or are there signs of strong negative emotions? So addressing deceitfulness. She talks about lie, or when interviewees lie or distort the truth, when they withhold the truth, evading, when there's no denial, or when there's too much denial. So again, polar opposites, but both as equally important. And the most, basically, if their story just doesn't add up, right? Okay. Oh God, Sam Smith, you are too funny. The river man named my Bundy. Well, Ted Bundy actually did offer his insight, if that's the word, to the FBI, to law enforcement in regards to how they could try to catch the Green River Killer. When Gary Ridgway was still out committing his crimes, was not caught, Ted Bundy offered to give his insight. And you can listen to those interviews, and those are very fascinating. The way everything I just described here, the way Ted Bundy gives those answers and gives the information to law enforcement. Like what I just described, you guys will see if you listen to that. And again, let's be honest, Ted Bundy was not offering his help out of the goodness of his heart or trying to help law enforcement, like truly help them. He wasn't, trying to right his wrongs. No, Ted Bundy was very self-serving, narcissistic, and only cared about his own personal gains. So let that be known if someone isn't familiar with this case. And if they're like, oh, wow, wait, Ted Bundy tried to help an investigation. He tried to help himself. Let's call it like it is. Those are good tapes, but he was so manipulative. Renee, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm glad somebody else has listened to it because, it's just, I suggest, everybody listen to it after the show. So we're making our way here, folks. So the Chapter 8 rap sheet, again, summarizing at the end, be willing to suspend old habits and communication styles and to develop new and more effective ones to help your interpersonal communications, sharpen your listening skills, and enhance your ability to make better and more sound decisions. Interviews require care, consideration, and compassion for others, and the ability to show people that you care about them, their circumstances, their feelings, and their future. Listen when you'd rather give advice in regards to interrupting or to offer a quick opinion. Don't always jump in and do that. Look and listen for emotions and learn to recognize them accurately. So Chapter 9 is how to size someone up. And in this chapter, you'll learn how to gather and interpret information so that you can more effectively spot and understand 3 types of problematic behavior. And those 3 different types are concerning behavior, threatening behavior, and dangerous behavior. So CTD. CTT behaviors, as she calls them in her book, are all problematic and important to spot and understand, but some are more serious than others. So the following list here that I have notes for is one that Mary Ellen has seen the most frequently in her years of investigating and profiling violent crimes and in studying people who engage in these behaviors. So again, this list it's not all encompassing. There are certainly more, but these are just more of the most common that she saw. So these behaviors are impulsivity, inappropriate, narcissism, lack of empathy, objectification of others, blaming others for failures and problems, paranoia, rule breaking, use of violence, thoughts and fantasies of violence, poor coping skills, and equal opportunity hatred. Now, the CTD behaviors, as we just described, are the result of personality traits and characteristics that cluster together and can form a lifetime pattern of behavior. We talked about this before, but we're talking about it again. The people closest to you probably pose a greater threat to you than strangers. When assessing someone for CTD behaviors, think about the following aspects of your own as well as his or her life: public, professional, personal, private, and secret. So chapter 10, we're going to bounce into now. But first, Tish is saying I need to find her interviews with Ridgway. Oh my God. Easily found on YouTube. Absolutely, Tish. Worth a listen. But also worth watching as well. So my 2 cents, not just for you, Tish, but for everybody, is to watch and listen to those interviews that Mary Ellen O'Toole does with Gary Ridgway at least twice. One of them, do I want to say 3 times? Maybe watch it 3 times. Yeah, I would suggest 3 times, and here's why. Just sit back, watch, listen. Okay, that's watching 1. Second time, when you do it, and number 2 and 3, you can intermix with whatever order you want, but I think you'll get the most out of it is if you then focus just on the words, just on the conversation that is happening. And then the third watch, focus on mannerisms and body language and body, behavior, things that not just Gary Ridgway is doing, but Mary Ellen, because Mary Ellen knows that certain ways that she presents herself will elicit a response in Gary for the most part. Even though he was a difficult interview, think about it. The FBI, when they go into interview you, it's very strategic. So I would say, if you want to get the most out of it, and that's just me being like very into true crime and wanting to like deep dive and analyze everything, watch it 3 times. For that, like in that order, I think you'll get a lot out of it because there's so much happening, right? And it'd be easy to miss something, but when you break it down, I think you'll see more. Just my 2 cents, just my 2 cents. Thank you, Todd. Thank you. So chapter 10, the book goes to how to make a decision. And it talks about when you go to make a decision, you'll go through a very similar process in regards to things that we just described. And just like a profiler, you will gather lots of evidence and information. You will evaluate it, and you will not allow just one piece of information to overshadow another. You'll look at the totality of everything that you've been able to uncover. And in regards to decision, the word decision, that can be something very simple. It can be something a bit more complex that will have either short-term or even long-term, I don't want to say consequences because that makes it sound awful, but nonetheless, that's kind of what it is. So the person you are evaluating seems nice or friendly. Don't use that. The person you are evaluating is highly respected, comes from a good family. Again, don't go by that. These are all things not to go by, right? The person you are evaluating looks harmless. The person you are evaluating is religious, went to the same college as you, belongs to the same, frat organization or charity, sorority, or in some other way shares something in common with you that lures you into false sense of safety. The person you are evaluating has the trappings of a normal life: a house, a yard, a dog, a marriage, and usually one or more children. The person you are evaluating seems important. They graduated from an important school. They're wearing an expensive suit. They're driving an expensive car. And this otherwise lulls you with an impressive title or moniker. So, to wrap it up, chapter 10 goes over again the acronym SMART. Decisions are not just based on one detail, they're based on a list of circumstances. Write down all the details to make sure you are weighing and interpreting everything properly. Look for holes and blind spots. What might you have missed? What might you have overlooked? And before making any decision, carefully consider, like I just mentioned, its long-term ramifications. Can you live with all the possible negative consequences of the decision that you make? Hi, Beckham. Hey, Shelly. Beckham, you're not even subscribed to my channel, so that's why you didn't know I was live. You just kind of happened to come upon as my guest, but good to see you. So, again, this is the book that we are going over tonight for anybody that came in late. So, chapter 11, The Dangerous Instincts Safety Guide. It talks about what makes you vulnerable. Dangerous people often seek out vulnerable people who are most likely to fall for their schemes. Because of this, one of the ways you can make yourself and everyone around you safer is to think about your vulnerabilities. Being emotionally vulnerable can cause most people to seek comfort, answers, and help. And it's during these times in our lives that many of us let our guard down and are too ready to trust someone that we really should not be trusting. The chapter 11 rap sheet is, and this is the last one, your SMART acronym skills will help you make safer decisions in any situation you find yourself. Emotional vulnerabilities, which we've all experienced. Loneliness, grief, low self-esteem. It can make you more likely to let your guard down at the wrong moment. Dangerous people know how to use your emotional vulnerabilities against you. It's important to do a danger assessment for your children because they are not yet able to do this assessment on their own. And try to reduce your professional, financial, physical, emotional vulnerabilities now so that you are a less attractive target for someone trying to take advantage of you. So that is pretty much all of the notes that I have for this book. So again, I'm doing the book review because I highly recommend this book. Again, it's a little over 230 pages. It's an easy read, but with that being said, every chapter is packed with examples, information, descriptions of the terms that she's saying. That's one of the things I really like about this is she doesn't just throw a concept out there, even though they seem pretty straightforward, which we're like, okay, yeah, we all know what that is. From an FBI profiler standpoint, she breaks down what it is about that she's referring to specifically. And I think that's so helpful to the reader. Again, throughout the book, she gives examples of cases that she worked. To me, that was like the most fascinating part of the book. I mean, the information in itself about how to avoid, unsafe situations, that's so important as well. But just the true crime person in me was like, when she'd start talking about cases, I'm like, yes, I'm here for that. And if you're here until the end of my book review, one of the things that I found so good in here, and I didn't want to, necessarily quote it because I want you guys to read it for yourself because she goes into it quite a bit, and Beckham, I'm glad you're here. So not only did Mary Ellen O'Toole interview Gary Ridgway, she also interviewed David Parker Wright. And if you're wondering who that is, we we as in me and Mr. Beckham did a case review on David Parker Wright. And one of the things that she talks about in here is meeting David Parker Wright and how he was in person when she met him. Very polite, very soft-spoken, an absolute gentleman, so on and so forth. Every positive trait that she had of him right in front of her, she spoke very positively. And she's like, I'm a trained FBI profiler, and I knew what I had just walked away from, and that was his trailer and all of the atrocities and crimes that he had just committed. He was a horrible killer. Horrible, horrible. What he did to his victims, horrific. Not just physically, mentally, emotionally. It was horrible if you're not familiar with that case. And so she knew, again, this is what she's trained to do for her job. And to have her describe that was just, I felt so impactful in this book and so profound, and just really goes to show. She says, if I didn't know better, like, I'm just paraphrasing here, like if she didn't know better and didn't know what she just walked away from, where he committed his crimes, and if she was just meeting this guy for the first time, it wouldn't connect that he was as evil as he was. He was anything but that when she first met him. So again, when you get the book, you will read about that more. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. The work that Mary Ellen O'Toole has done, spot on. And since she has retired from the FBI, if you guys do look her up on YouTube, you're going to see a lot of interviews that she has done since she has retired. She's one of those former agents that there was years upon years that anytime there was something in something in the news, in the media, that needed, and a former FBI's kind of opinion about what was going on, she was that person that, I would flip the TV on and she was the one that would be talking about it from the FBI perspective of what law enforcement would be looking for, or what we as the public, would be told at that early stage, so on and so forth. So again, if you look her up, you're going to see a lot of interviews with her. She knows her stuff. She knows her stuff. But again, one of the ways that I talked about her at the very beginning of the episode is how she comes across. And it's, again, I think we go by what we see on TV about, FBI profilers, or, the FBI being, looking and acting and being a certain way. And I find Mary Ellen O'Toole very pleasant to listen to, very soft-spoken, very calm, a very calm demeanor, a very warm, inviting, and open kind of dialogue that she has when doing her interviews. And I just find that absolutely fascinating, because we have a certain perception of how I think, tough FBI agents are. And her approach just wasn't like that. So, but again, if you watch her interviews, you'll see for yourself. So, Todd, she was on yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I totally didn't just see what you typed, but yeah, that's absolutely what I was just saying. She's been on a lot. She's been on a lot. So, I hope that if you guys do purchase this book and read it, you will find it so fascinating what she has to say that you guys will, go and find these other interviews that she's done and listen to them. And she's been on other podcasts where you can listen to her speak as well. Or maybe on the flip side, you go and listen to some of that, and then you're like, wow, you know what? I do want to know more. I'm going to get the book. Just get the book. I absolutely recommend it. So, are there any last questions or comments or anything about the book that I didn't answer that you guys want to know? Certainly type it in the chat now before we kind of close things down. Otherwise, if you're catching this on replay, leave a comment, hit that like button. And yeah, if you have a question on the book, let me know, and I will certainly answer your question as best I can. Yeah, Todd, exactly. Good cop, bad cop. That's so important in their line of work. And in regards to the Gary Ridgway Green River Killer interview that she did, you can, she's definitely, you get that good cop kind of vibe, but he was a very particular type of individual, and she knew how to work and how to play to get him to give information. And even still, she even says he was hard to interview. He would just, yeah, we went through that earlier, but yeah, he was very difficult. Even to a trained profiler, he was very difficult. So, all right. Just double checking that I went through everything here. Yes, perfect. Okay. So there will be the weekly True Crime and Chill tomorrow night. That will be live tomorrow night. Again, December is absolutely a crazy month. So come next month, things will be a little bit back on a regular schedule. So I was not able to do the True Crime and Chill this Friday night. So we will do it tomorrow night. And there's certainly a lot to talk about. With that being said, I will also be posting on the show's Instagram, Facebook page, and I'll do a community post here, that this Friday I will be doing and I'm really, really excited, a live event over on the Once Upon a Crime YouTube channel. So go over and subscribe to that. Check it out. There will be a bunch of content creators on that, and I will be one of them. And that is on Friday. It is 11 a.m. Pacific time. So tune into that. Also on the Once Upon a Crime podcast downloads, this week's podcast episode, you will hear your girl in it. I give a little shout out for Danny After Dark. So tune in for that. Subscribe to her podcast if you're not already. I mean, come on. She's been doing this since 2016. It's amazing. She's an OG. Sign up for it. And yes, this week's most recent one, I was in it. So, which is very exciting. All right. Other than that, just double check. Oh my God, Aaron. Beckham. So what Beckham is talking about is about a little over a month ago now. You guys have been asking for so long that we did. There is finally Danny After Dark merch, and some of the merch is Beckham. I was feeling kind that day, and I'm really regretting it now. So yes, there is Mr. Beckham merch, candle, t-shirt, so on and so forth. So check that out on the, yep, here it is right now. Check that out. Get yourself some Beckham merch just so he can stop spamming my chats telling y'all to order his merch. So that is that. Christ's sakes, Beckham. Let's see. Karen is saying, Danny, the gift of fear. What is that about? I'm going to check that out after I end this stream. You have me intrigued, Karen. You have me intrigued. Good night, Kane. Danny, can we call you after the show? Okay, yep, that's fine. Thank you, Shelly. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this book review. Again, Dangerous Instincts: Using FBI Profiler's Tactics to Avoid Unsafe Situations by Mary Ellen O'Toole. So pick this up. You will not be disappointed. I will see you guys tomorrow for the weekly True Crime and Chill. Otherwise, until next time, remember, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us. Bye, everyone.